The first sign you were getting close was not a skyline or a landmark. It was a billboard, a bright promise on the side of the highway that said pecans, candy, and something cold to drink. And for a family packed into a station wagon with tired legs and an overheated map on somebody's lap, that sign felt like relief. Because before modern gas stations and mega travel centers took over, the American road trip had different lifelines. And one of the most unforgettable was Stuckey's, a stop that was part snack shop, part souvenir store, part bathroom break, and part memory factory. And what many people forget is this. Stuckey's was not just a place to buy something sweet. It was a whole roadside ritual. Pull in, stretch your legs, let the kids stare at postcards and toys. Smell the candy first before you see it, and leave with a paper bag that made the car feel quieter for the next 100 miles. Tonight, we're going back to that era. 25 forgotten Stuckey's roadside foods families ate before gas stations took over. Not fancy restaurant meals. Road food, the kind you could carry with one hand and eat with the other while the highway rolled on. And one of the most surprising foods in this story wasn't even meant to be eaten right away. It was meant to survive the whole trip, hidden in the back seat like treasure. We'll get to that. Stuckey's began in the South, and it grew from a simple roadside idea into something much bigger. A dependable stop on long drives, especially as highways expanded and Americans started traveling farther for vacations, family visits, and work. In the middle decades of the 20th century, when interstate travel and car culture changed the country, places like Stuckey's became the friendly markers of progress. You were moving, you were going somewhere, and the road had its own little comforts. The food mattered because road trips were not always easy. Cars ran hot, roads were long, fast food wasn't everywhere, and families needed stops that felt safe, familiar, and affordable. Stuckey's delivered that with a small army of shelf-stable sweets, salty snacks, and simple counterfoods that could feed a carload without wrecking the budget. So let's pull off the highway, hear the tires crunch on the lot, and step inside. The first smell hits you before anything else. Pecan log roll was the star, the item people still whisper about with a kind of fond disbelief. A thick log of nougat rolled in chopped pecans, sweet, dense, and built to last in a glove compartment. Families bought it because it felt like a signature, like you didn't really go to Stuckey's unless you got one. It mattered because it was portable energy on a long drive, and it didn't require plates or forks. The human detail is the waxy wrapper, peeled back slowly, because everyone knew it was sticky and you didn't want it all over your hands. And right beside the log roll, another pecan candy waited, softer and richer. Pecan pralines were sweet squares or rounds that tasted like brown sugar and butter, studded with pecans. In the car, they felt like a treat you had to eat carefully because they crumbled and melted. Families bought them because pralines felt like a southern specialty, something tied to place, not just sugar. They mattered because a regional taste made the trip feel real. The human detail is the little box or bag open in the back seat, with everyone leaning in to see how many pieces there were. From pralines, the next stop in the candy case was the one that always looked like it came from a different world. Chocolate fudge was thick, dark, and cut into heavy squares. Sometimes it was plain chocolate. Sometimes it came with nuts. Sometimes it had a swirl. Families bought it because fudge felt rich, like a dessert you didn't make at home on a random Tuesday. It mattered because it turned an ordinary drive into something closer to a holiday. The human detail is the paper it was wrapped in, folded tight, and the way it softened just from the warmth of the car. And what came next was even more old-fashioned, the kind of candy that felt like it belonged to grandparents and porch swings. Peanut brittle was crisp, glossy and loud. It snapped when you broke it. It stuck to your teeth if you weren't careful. Families bought it because it was cheap, satisfying, and it lasted. It mattered because long trips needed snacks that didn't disappear in 5 minutes. The human detail is the sound, that sharp crack when someone breaks a piece in half, followed by a brief silence as everybody chews. After brittle, another sweet showed up that looked like a cloud but ate like a brick. Divinity was pale, airy-looking candy that was actually dense and sweet, sometimes with chopped nuts folded in. Families bought it because it felt homemade, like something you'd see at a church social, but packaged for the road. It mattered because it brought that kitchen feeling into a roadside stop. The human detail is the way it crumbles slightly when you bite, then melts down into pure sugar, like it was trying to comfort you quickly. From divinity, the candy aisle turned playful. Saltwater taffy was bright, chewy, and wrapped in little twists. Even families who didn't know what saltwater meant in this context knew it meant fun. They bought it because kids could pick flavors, and picking flavors made everyone feel like they had a vote in the trip. It mattered because small choices keep kids happy on long drives. The human detail is the backseat litter of tiny wrappers, gathered and stuffed into a cup holder because somebody still cared about keeping the car decent. And one of the most grown-up sweets in the store felt like a secret. Chocolate-covered cherries and cordials were little candies with liquid centers, the kind that made kids feel like they were handling something sophisticated. Families bought them because they felt special, like a gift disguised as candy. It mattered because road trips were full of small rewards, and a candy like this made the stop feel like an event. The human detail is the careful bite, because if you went too fast, the syrup center could spill, and nobody wanted that on a shirt. After the candy came the snack side, because the road doesn't run on sugar alone. Roasted salted pecans were the simplest Stuckey's purchase, and maybe the smartest. Pecans in a bag, salted, crunchy, and deeply satisfying. Families bought them because they were portable protein and fat, the kind of snack that actually calmed hunger. It mattered because a long drive can make you irritable, and a salty snack can save the mood. The human detail is the sound of the bag crinkling as it's passed from hand to hand, like a shared resource. And if salted pecans were for hunger, the sweeter version was for pure nostalgia. Cinnamon-sugared pecans, sometimes spiced and sweet, felt like fair food on the highway. Families bought them because the smell alone was irresistible, sweet, and warm, drifting through the store and into memory. It mattered because scent is a shortcut to comfort, and comfort matters on long trips. The human detail is the first handful, eaten too fast, followed by sticky fingertips wiped on napkins that were never thick enough. Then came a snack that looked simple, but turned into a road trip ritual. Mixed nuts and trail mix bags were the kind of purchase that felt practical. A little sweet, a little salty, easy to share, and easy to stash for later. Families bought them because they lasted and they traveled well. It mattered because road trips were unpredictable, and having backup snacks in the car felt like security. The human detail is the stash itself, a bag tucked under a seat and forgotten until the next stretch of highway got quiet and hungry. Now we shift from the shelves to the foods people remember as real eating, the kind that felt like you sat down for a minute and became human again. The fountain milkshake was cold, thick, and slow to drink. Vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, depending on the place and the era. Families bought milkshakes because they felt like a celebration, and because the cold sweetness made the heat of the road feel smaller. It mattered because kids could be bribed back into patience with one cold cup. The human detail is the paper straw that collapses halfway through, and the way everyone keeps trying anyway. Right beside the shake, another drink carried the flavor of pure summer. Ice-cold lemonade, sometimes sweet and sharp, was the kind of drink you could finish before the car even started moving again. Families bought it because it refreshed and reset you. It mattered because hydration was not a modern wellness concept on the road. It was survival in a hot car with no air conditioning. The human detail is the condensation on the cup, water rings on the counter, and a kid's hands wrapped around it like it's the only cool thing in the world. And one of the most surprising foods people remember from roadside stops is how often a simple hot cup became the whole point. Road coffee in a paper cup, strong and straightforward, mattered for the adults the way candy mattered for the kids. Families bought it because long driving takes focus, and a hot cup gave you something to hold and something to do. It mattered because road trips were work as well as fun. The human detail is the lidless cup and the careful walk back to the car, because one bump and that coffee would become a disaster. Now we move into the sandwiches, the foods that had to travel from counter to car without falling apart. Ham and cheese sandwiches, wrapped in paper, were the dependable choice. Bread, ham, cheese, sometimes a simple spread. Families bought them because they were filling, familiar, and fast. It mattered because a sit-down restaurant wasn't always possible, and you still needed actual food. The human detail is the paper wrap warmed slightly by the sandwich, open on a knee in the passenger's seat while the engine idles. For families who wanted something even more southern, another sandwich appeared in many roadside memories. Pimento cheese sandwiches were creamy, slightly tangy, and surprisingly satisfying. In some stops, it was the kind of sandwich that felt regional, like you couldn't quite get the same way back home. Families bought it because it was inexpensive and filling, and it didn't require sliced meat. It mattered because meat cost money, and spreads stretched cheaper ingredients into a meal. The human detail is the orange tint of the filling against white bread, and the way it sticks slightly to the paper wrap. And right beside pimento cheese, another spread carried the taste of thrift. Egg salad sandwiches were chopped eggs, a little mayonnaise, salt, pepper, sometimes a hint of relish. Families bought them because eggs were affordable protein and the sandwich felt hearty. It mattered because it was a meatless lunch that still satisfied. The human detail is the smell when you open the wrapper, gentle but unmistakable, and the way you try to eat it neatly, because egg salad is never as tidy as you want it to be. Then came the sandwich that felt like a cooler meal, even if it wasn't. Chicken salad on bread was a common roadside option, made from chopped chicken mixed with mayonnaise and simple seasoning. Families bought it because it tasted like picnic food without needing to pack a picnic. It mattered because it made the trip feel like vacation, even if you were just driving to see relatives. The human detail is the crisp lettuce in some versions, the one fresh crunch that made the sandwich feel bright. Now we step into the hot foods, the ones that made the store feel like more than candy and souvenirs. Hot dogs, sometimes plain, sometimes loaded with a classic road meal. A sausage and a bun, maybe mustard, maybe relish, maybe onions. Families bought them because they were cheap, quick, and didn't require plates. It mattered because kids would actually eat them without argument, and that alone could save a trip. The human detail is the hot dog wrapped in paper, handed to the back seat, and the instant hush that follows. And one of the most beloved variations was the one that turned a hot dog into a full meal. Chili dogs were messy, rich, and worth it. Chili spooned over a hot dog, sometimes with onions, sometimes with cheese if the counter offered it. Families bought them because they were filling and felt like real diner food. It mattered because you could get a hearty, hot bite without a long wait. The human detail is the stack of napkins grabbed on the way out, because everyone knew you would need them. From hot dogs, the next hot plate was the one that made kids stare at the counter and adults glance at the wallet. Hamburgers and fries were the classic pairing, simple and satisfying. A burger cooked hot, fries salted, maybe a pickle spear on the side. Families bought them because they fed hungry people fast and made the stop feel like a proper lunch. It mattered because one hot meal in the middle of a trip could reset moods and energy. The human detail is the smell of fries in the car afterward, lingering like a souvenir you didn't buy. And when you wanted the burger experience but needed it to stretch further, there was a classic solution. A double patty road burger, in some places, was simply the bigger version for bigger hunger. Not every stop offered it, but many roadside counters understood a basic truth. Drivers and travelers sometimes needed more than a snack. Families bought bigger burgers because long drives burn through patience and calories at the same time. It mattered because a hearty meal could prevent the next argument in the back seat. The human detail is the greasy paper bag, folded tight, warm against your hand. After burgers, the counter sometimes offered a bowl that felt like comfort more than convenience. Chili in a cup, thick and warm, was the kind of food you could eat with a spoon while standing, then throw the cup away and keep moving. Families bought it because it was filling, cheap, and warming, especially in cooler months. It mattered because a hot cup can calm a travel day that feels tense. The human detail is the spoon clinking against the cup and the way crackers, when they were offered, got crushed in by hand without thinking. Now we shift to the baked goods, the sweets that weren't candy but still felt like a reward. Fried hand pies, often filled with apple, peach, or cherry, were a road trip dessert you could hold. The crust was crisp and slightly greasy, the filling sweet and hot if you ate it right away. Families bought them because they felt homemade and portable. It mattered because dessert that traveled well was road gold. The human detail is the powdered sugar on fingers, wiped on jeans because napkins never kept up. And if hand pies were the portable dessert, another baked good was all about smell. Cinnamon rolls, sticky and soft, were the kind of item you could smell from across the store. Families bought them because they were comforting and filling, and because they could become breakfast the next morning in a motel room. It mattered because the road wasn't just one day. It was a string of days, and food had to stretch across them. The human detail is the icing smudge inside the box, proof the roll was handled before it was eaten. From cinnamon rolls, another dessert, lived behind glass in many roadside memories. Slice of pecan pie was the full circle moment, pecans again, but now baked into syrupy filling. Not every location served pie slices, but in places that did, it felt like a sit-down treat in the middle of a drive. Families bought it because it tasted like the South and because it felt special. It mattered because a shared slice could end the stop on a high note. The human detail is the fork scraping the plate, slow and careful, because nobody wanted the last bite to be someone else's. Now we come to the food that wasn't eaten in the store, but traveled farther than any sandwich. Box candy assortments, packed neatly, were often bought as gifts for relatives at the end of the trip. Families bought them because you didn't show up empty-handed, not when someone had been waiting for you. It mattered because road travel was about family ties, and food was a polite way to say you remembered. The human detail is the box kept safe in the back seat, guarded like it's fragile because it wasn't just candy. It was proof you made the drive. And one of the most overlooked Stuckey's foods wasn't sweet at all. Pickled okra and pickled vegetables in jars were the practical souvenir. Tangy, crunchy, and shelf-stable, they could ride home without spoiling. Families bought them because they felt regional and real, and because a jar could last beyond the trip. It mattered because food souvenirs used to be about preservation, not branding. The human detail is the jar clink in a paper bag, carried carefully because breaking in the car would ruin the whole day. Now we reach the item that proves what Stuckey's really was at its best. A bag of something for later. Sometimes it was nuts, sometimes candy, sometimes a few rolls, sometimes a mix of small things. Families bought extra because the road always had surprises. A closed restaurant, a long detour, a child who suddenly became hungry again. It mattered because Stuckey's wasn't only feeding you now. It was feeding your future self, the part of you that would be tired 2 hours from now. The human detail is the bag tucked under a seat, saved, then quietly opened when the car finally got too quiet. By the time you look back on these Stuckey's foods, you can see what they were really doing. They were building a road culture, a rhythm of travel that wasn't dominated by giant gas stations and fluorescent aisles of the same products everywhere. Stuckey's stops felt personal. They felt regional. They felt like you had arrived somewhere, even if you were still in the middle of nowhere. And what many people forget is how much of the American road trip used to depend on places like this. Not just for snacks, but for a break. A reset. A place that felt safe for families. A place where you could stretch your legs and buy something that turned the next stretch of highway into something manageable. Modern gas stations and travel centers took over because they were efficient. One stop for fuel, food, bathrooms, and everything else. But efficiency has a cost. It smooths out the quirks. It erases the little regional flavors. It replaces the memory of that place with the memory of that kind of place. Stuckey's was once a landmark you could taste. So if you've ever unwrapped a pecan log roll in the passenger seat, or passed a bag of salty pecans to the back seat, or watched a child go quiet over a milkshake, then you already understand what these forgotten roadside foods really were. They were not just snacks. They were mile markers. They were family rituals. They were small comforts in a country built on long roads. And even now, when the highway feels faster and the stops feel more interchangeable, the memory still lingers in one simple idea. Somewhere up ahead, there's a place to pull over, take a breath, and eat something sweet.